Good evening, dear listener. Find a cozy spot, perhaps adjust your blanket just a little, take a slow, calming breath, and settle your head gently onto your pillow. Pour yourself a cup of something warm if you like, and let the quietness of the night wrap around you like a soft, familiar cloak. Tonight, I invite you to relax and drift into a world where stories are gentle whispers and the boundaries of time are just a faint shadow on the wall. Imagine just for a moment a world where your favorite fast food, those quick bites and hurried meals, would have somehow slipped into the fabric of the Middle Ages. Picture bustling villages, not with the usual clatter of carts or the clanging of blacksmiths, but with the scent of roasted meats and spiced bread carried on the wind like secret messages. A place where the modern rush of a drive-thru with its endless lines and impatient beeps is replaced by a slow, almost meditative pace, perhaps like waiting for a courier through a fog that never quite lifts. There's a strange, quiet magic in this idea, an echo of a time when everything moved just a little slower, yet somehow the hunger for convenience was always there, whispering like a distant wind. Shadows flicker like flickering lanterns, and the air hums with the murmurs of a world caught between the familiar and the fantastical. And as your eyes grow heavier, you'll soon wake, not in your bed, but in a place where the air is thick with smoke, herbs, and secrets. A world where your role will be far stranger than anything you've known. The air is thick with a mixture of scents. Smoke curling up from a nearby hearth, the sharp tang of herbs burned too long in a pot, and the faint, sour smell of unwashed linen. You notice the rough texture of the mattress beneath you, the coarse fabric of your blanket that scratches against your skin as you shift. Your fingers brush against a wooden floor, uneven and cold, with splinters that seem to whisper stories of years gone by. The room is dim, lit only by a flickering candle whose flame dances shadows across the walls, revealing cracks and uneven stones that make up the building's structure. A faint creak echoes from somewhere outside, a cart rumbling over cobblestones perhaps, or a door opening and closing with a groan. The distant clang of metal on metal, the hurried footsteps of someone passing in the hall, and the muffled voices of villagers add a background hum, like a strange, primitive symphony. The air carries an unmistakable scent of sweat and damp wool, mingled with the smoky aroma of burning herbs and the faint, acrid sting of vinegar. What passes for air in this world, where cleanliness is a luxury and fresh air is a myth? Your tongue tastes a dull, metallic flavor, perhaps from the water you drank last night, cloudy and lukewarm, with a hint of something bitter lingering on your palate. You shiver slightly, feeling the roughness of your coarse, itchy clothes against your skin, the fabric stiff from days of wear without much washing. Your first instinct might be to reach for your phone, an invisible, modern talisman that links you to everything and everyone. But here there is no screen, no buzzing notification. Instead, you fumble for a rough cloth to cover yourself, the sensation of coarse fibers rough against your fingertips. You sit up slowly, feeling the unevenness of the floor beneath your bare feet, the cold seeping into your bones. As you do, you notice the small, cluttered space around you, a table piled with rough pottery, a shelf holding jars filled with dried herbs, and a strange contraption hanging from the ceiling, perhaps a mask with a long beak, smelling of dried flowers and strange spices, meant to ward off something unseen. The room feels cramped, yet oddly alive, every sound, every scent, every texture pulling you deeper into this unfamiliar world. You might chuckle softly at the thought, your modern mind still clinging to the idea that a bad morning is missing your coffee or spilling your latte. Here, your first realization is that your idea of discomfort has taken on a whole new meaning. Your mask smells worse than the patients it's meant to protect you from, and the air feels heavy enough to press down on your chest. You wonder how anyone can breathe in this haze without choking. With a slow, deliberate movement, you rise from the bed. You reach for a rough woven cloak hanging nearby, pulling it over your head. You notice the scratchy texture against your skin, a reminder that comfort is a foreign concept here. Your hands tremble slightly, not from cold, but from the surreal feeling of waking up in a place where everything is so raw, so elemental. Still, you know you need to act. You step cautiously onto the uneven wooden planks, feeling the splinters poke beneath your feet. You take a deep breath, perhaps the first real breath of this new, strange world, and prepare to step outside. As you push open a heavy wooden door, the scene expands before you. The village is busy. People move with purpose, some hurried, others slow and deliberate, wrapped in rough woolen garments. Children run past, their laughter and shouts echoing against the stone walls, while merchants call out their wares, dried meats, fresh bread, and strange bottles filled with liquids that glint in the weak sunlight. You catch sight of a blacksmith hammering away in the distance, sparks flying like tiny stars, and a group of soldiers in battered armor, their faces weathered by years of toil and worry. Dozens of eyes turn towards you, some wary, some curious, and you feel a mixture of respect and unease. Your presence, marked by the unfamiliarity of your attire, or perhaps by the strange contraption around your face, commands attention, an odd blend of reverence and suspicion. The cobblestone streets are uneven enough to make you stumble if you're not careful. The scent of burning wood, animal dung, and boiling stew fills the air, mixing into a peculiar, almost intoxicating aroma that seems to seep into your very bones. Here, life moves at a different rhythm, slower, more deliberate, yet with an undercurrent of urgency that's hard to pin down. You notice a baker kneading dough with rough hands, his face smeared with flour, while a woman nearby tends to a sick child, whispering prayers under her breath. The villagers glance at you, some with a mixture of awe and caution, their expressions betraying a shared understanding that you are somehow out of place, yet also a part of this strange, timeless tapestry. And as you take it all in, the textures, the sounds, the smells, you realize that you are standing at the edge of a world that's both familiar and utterly alien. To truly understand where you've just woken up, you need to step back to look at the bigger picture, the world that shaped this life, this moment in time. Because, dear listener, this is just the beginning of your journey into a place where the past isn't just a story in a history book, but a living, breathing world waiting to be explored. You find yourself living in a time where the world is shrouded in a kind of gentle chaos, a place where the past feels both distant and strangely close, yet utterly different from your own. It's the early 14th century, a period marked by the reign of kings and queens, whose crowns are heavy with both gold and the weight of endless wars. You've woken up somewhere in the middle of what they call the late Middle Ages, a time when Europe is a patchwork of fragmented kingdoms, each vying for power like children, fighting over the last piece of bread. Except the bread here is often a loaf of coarse, dark bread, and the fight is about whose lord owns the land you walk on. It's a world carved out of stone and wood, with castles looming like giants over muddy villages, and the streets are a jumble of market stalls, church bells, and the occasional parade of peasants trudging home after a long day of ploughing or weaving. Imagine the society as a grand, layered cake. If you cut into it, you'd find nobility perched at the top, draped in velvets and jewels, ruling with a hand as firm as a blacksmith's hammer. Beneath them, the clergy holds sway, not just spiritually but politically, whispering in the king's ear and sometimes pulling strings behind the scenes as if they were puppeteers of both souls and crowns. Below that, there are the merchants, those clever traders whose wealth depends on the whims of fashion and the scarcity of spices from distant lands. And at the very bottom, the peasants, more numerous than anyone else, living off the land, their lives a constant balancing act of survival, with each day's fate determined by luck, weather, and sometimes a sudden outbreak of pestilence. Now the divide between the rich and the poor is as stark as a well-polished mirror versus a muddy puddle. Nobles dine on roasted meats and sweetened wine, their tables laden as if they're preparing for a feast that could last for days, while the peasants scrape together what little they can, perhaps a piece of bread, some cheese, and a bowl of thin, questionable soup. Power is a game played by those with gold and influence. The peasant's role is to serve and obey, often with little choice but to accept the roll of the dice, hoping that their lord's favour or a good harvest will keep them alive another season. Of course, some survive by sheer cunning, and others, well, just by being in the right place at the right time, or by praying really hard. Step outside and you're stepping into a world that looks like a living tapestry woven from mud brick houses, cobblestone streets, and the wild, sprawling fields stretching to the horizon. Picture bustling towns where the market is noisier than a modern Black Friday sale, but with more pigs than people, and where vendors shout over each other, fresh bread, spiced apples, dried figs, as if shouting louder will make their goods more desirable. The aroma of fresh bread mingles with the stench of manure and the faint, pungent smoke from open fires, filling the air with a smell that's both inviting and a little overwhelming. The roads are muddy and rutted, turning into rivers of filth when it rains, and the buildings lean slightly as if they're about to topple over in the next gust of wind. Churches dominate the skyline, their bells tolling rhythmically, calling the faithful to prayer, though for many, prayer is less about devotion and more about seeking divine intervention in a world full of uncertainties. Your daily life here begins with the sounds of waking, perhaps the clatter of a blacksmith hammering away at his anvil, the distant bleating of sheep, or the shrill cry of a hawk circling overhead. Unlike your modern mornings, which might start with a gentle alarm and a cup of coffee, here it's more likely to be a rooster's crow followed by the sharp clang of the village bell, summoning everyone to work. The rhythm of the day is relentless. Farm work, tending animals, weaving, cooking over open fires, and attending to the needs of the household, all repetitive, all demanding. Taking a bath was almost suspicious, like announcing to your neighbors that you had something to hide or that you were planning something shady. Cleanliness was a luxury, and many believed that water could carry disease, so most washed as little as possible, often just rinsing their hands or face in a basin of lukewarm water that looked more like tea than anything refreshing. Your modern frustrations, fighting with slow Wi-Fi, the chaos of traffic, or trying to find a quiet moment amid endless notifications, are almost laughable compared to the struggles here. Imagine trying to light a damp piece of wood in the rain, or carrying buckets of water up a hill every morning as your workout. The pace of life is slower, yes, but it's also more unpredictable, an unpredictable dance where your survival depends on whether the weather holds, whether your crops flourish, and whether the local lord decides to show mercy or demand extra taxes. Politically, the world is a patchwork quilt of kingdoms and principalities, each with their own rulers, kings, barons, dukes, whose authority is often as fragile as a cobweb. Some areas are peaceful, ruled with a gentle hand, while others are plagued by wars, invasions, and constant power struggles. The Holy Roman Empire dominates Central Europe while smaller kingdoms jostle for influence like children fighting over a toy. Lords and kings rely on armies of knights and foot soldiers, often equipped with armor that looks more like rusted metal sculptures than protective gear, and their battles are fought with a mixture of brute strength and political cunning. Religion is woven into every part of life. The church holds sway over both the mind and the matter. Superstitions are as common as bread, and many believe that a simple charm, a prayer, or a pilgrimage can ward off plagues or misfortune. Some folks swore that carrying a sprig of garlic or onions could keep away evil spirits, organic, if not entirely scientific medicine. Others thought that sniffing flowers soaked in vinegar would keep the pestilence at bay, which is essentially a medieval version of a face mask, an aromatic, if questionable, form of protection. And that mask with the long beak, a fragrant herbal contraption designed to ward off what they believed were invisible, deadly spirits, an early attempt at medical science with a dash of superstition. So now, as you begin to understand the world you've woken up in, it's clear that you're peering into a universe where the daily grind is as relentless as a storm at sea, and where the whims of fate are as unpredictable as the weather. It's a world of contrasts, luxury and poverty, faith and superstition, order and chaos, all woven together in a fabric that, while unfamiliar, holds its own strange, compelling charm. And yet this is just the surface. To truly grasp the heart of it, to understand how people lived, loved, and survived amid all this, we need to step back and see the bigger picture, the grand design of history that shaped these lives, these moments, these centuries. Because, dear listener, what you're about to explore is a story not just of a time long ago, but of a world that in many ways mirrors our own, just with different costumes, different battles, and a very different pace. You slowly wake up, your body stretching in a way that feels more like a series of stiff, deliberate movements than a fluid, effortless stretch. The first thing you notice is the coolness of the air, perhaps a bit sharper than you'd like, slipping through the small cracks and gaps in the rough-hewn walls of your humble dwelling. You sit up carefully, feeling the coarse, itchy blanket that clings to your skin, reminding you that comfort is a luxury no one quite dares to expect. Your feet touch the uneven, splintered wooden floor, which creaks softly beneath you, each step a reminder of the craftsmanship that's more about necessity than finesse. Your hands instinctively search for water, maybe in a carved wooden basin or a clay jug, cold and slightly cloudy with a smell of mineral and faint, soapless soap. You dip your fingers into it, splashing a handful onto your face, the water rough against your skin, waking you up the way a slap might wake a sleepy dog. No fragrant soaps or fancy scrubs here, just plain water and perhaps a handful of dried herbs floating on the surface, trying to mask the dirt and smell that's become part of everyday life. You wipe your face with a rough cloth, its fibers scratching softly, and marvel at how in this world cleanliness is less about vanity and more about survival. To think, in your modern life you'd spend half an hour applying lotions, scrubbing with scented gels, and peering into a mirror. Here, it's splash, wipe, and hope the odor doesn't offend the neighbors. Most folks believe that taking a full bath is something suspicious, almost like announcing to everyone that you have something to hide, or worse, that you're trying to cheat the natural order. Instead, they rely on perfumes, mostly made from herbs, flowers, or even vinegar, to purify the air around them. Imagine dabbing a bit of crushed rosemary behind your ears, or sprinkling a few drops of vinegar into a basin of water, hoping it will mask the smell of yesterday's toil. There's a certain charm in this. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a quick spritz of deodorant, only with more herbs and less confidence. Forget your 10-step skincare routine. Here, survival is splashing some water and praying the smell doesn't scare the neighbors away. Now, Step into the interior of your humble home. The walls are dark, made of rough timber or wattle and daub, and the air is thick with the aroma of burning wood and dampness. A simple wooden table, scarred with knife cuts and burn marks, holds a handful of clay pots, some filled with dried herbs, others with leftover stew that's been cooling for hours. The shelves are cluttered with simple utensils, a rusty knife, a spoon carved from bone, a ragged cloth for wiping hands. The floor squeaks and shifts beneath your feet, the wood warped by years of moisture and time. The flickering glow of a small fire in the hearth sends shadows dancing across the uneven surfaces, the smell of smoked meat and charred wood mixing into a cozy, if slightly smoky atmosphere. Every sound, the crackle of burning logs, the distant murmur of voices from the village, the occasional squeak of a rat, becomes part of this humble symphony of domestic life. The textures of everything you touch are coarse, rough woven mats, thick woolen blankets, leather straps worn thin from use. It's a tactile world where even the softest fabric feels like it's been spun from the hair of a wild beast. Your clothes reflect the practicality of the era. Heavy, coarse wool tunics, stiff and itchy, designed to keep out the cold but not to caress your skin. Shoes are simple, often made from thick leather, uncomfortable and heavy, more like walking in little more than a pair of stiff, itchy shells. Wearing them feels like hugging a hedgehog as your feet protest with every step, and you might find yourself rubbing your toes, wishing for something softer. The fabric of your clothes itches, rubs, and sometimes even causes small rashes, but you wear them as a second skin, necessary armor against the chill and dirt. You can't help but chuckle silently at how your modern idea of discomfort might be a scratchy sweater or a slightly too tight pair of jeans. Here, it's wool that feels like it's trying to squeeze the life out of you, and yet it's all you have for warmth. Your morning meal mirrors the simplicity of your existence. You pick at a piece of hard, crusty bread, more stone than loaf, dunking it into a thin, lukewarm broth that tastes of dried herbs and a hint of something vaguely sour. A slice of aged cheese, crumbly and pungent, accompanies it, adding a sharp tang that awakens your senses more than any modern coffee ever could. Drinking from a wooden cup, you notice the flavor of the water, flat, slightly metallic, with a faint aftertaste of chalk, reminding you that cleanliness is a luxury here. Compared to your sleek flavored coffee or your bright fresh juice, this is a humble start, but it's fuel enough to face whatever the day holds. Now, before you step outside, you perform a few small rituals, simple yet deeply ingrained. You might tie a small amulet around your neck, a bit of cloth or a carved bone, believed to ward off illnesses or evil spirits. You whisper a quick prayer or cross yourself, hoping the divine will watch over you in this unpredictable world. Perhaps you light a stick of dried lavender or rosemary, burning it as incense, filling the small room with a fragrant haze that's meant to purify the air and clear away bad luck. Some might even put on a strange mask with a long beak, filled with herbs and aromatic plants designed to protect you from invisible dangers, an early kind of health precaution mixed with superstition. As you prepare to face the outside world, you feel a strange sense of acceptance. Maybe it's a little uncomfortable, maybe you miss the ease of your modern routines, but there's a quiet rhythm here that's oddly comforting. It's a world where hygiene is a matter of practicality, not vanity, and where every scrubbing, every scent, every piece of clothing is woven into the fabric of daily survival. And as you step beyond your door into the bustling village or the silent fields, you carry with you the subtle irony of it all, a life simpler in some ways, yet infinitely more resilient in others. Now that you've survived the morning rituals, it's time to step outside and see how the rest of the world expects you to play your role. Enough about soap and sour bread. Let's see what happens when you face the day's real work. You step out of the modest shelter that's been your refuge from the chill of dawn, your boots crunching softly against the uneven cobblestones or muddy paths, depending on the weather, which today might be a dull drizzle or a relentless sun baking the earth into dust. The air greets you with a mixture of scents, damp stone, hay, livestock, and the faint, smoky aroma drifting from a nearby fire where someone is preparing the day's meal. The sky, a dull grey or a cloudless blue, casts a muted light over the bustling village square or the open fields beyond, where villagers go about their morning routines. Children's laughter echoes in the distance, mingling with the clatter of carts, the calls of merchants, and the distant thud of a blacksmith's hammer striking hot metal. You are already dressed for your role, wearing the coarse, heavy garments that mark your station, perhaps a leather apron, a cloth bag slung over your shoulder filled with herbs, or a tool belt with small knives and brushes. Your mask, if you wear one, like the beak of a strange bird, sways slightly with each movement, filled with aromatic herbs that smell of crushed lavender, thyme, and dried rose petals. These scents serve as your armor against the fears and superstitions of the crowd, a fragrant shield to ward off what they believe are invisible dangers. Today you are here to perform your duties, whether that's tending to the sick, inspecting the injured, or perhaps advising on remedies that are more art than science. Your role in this community is vital, albeit often misunderstood. You are a healer, a purifier, a figure of respect, tinged with suspicion. Children stare at you, their eyes wide with curiosity and a flicker of fear, half wonder, half dread, like witnessing a strange creature from another world. Farmers and townsfolk glance your way with a mix of reverence and wariness, whispering stories about the strange masks and the herbs you carry. They see you as both a protector and a potential threat, a living reminder of the fragile boundary between health and disease, life and death. As you move through the marketplace or the village streets, your presence is marked by a mixture of sounds, the soft scrape of your boots on stone or mud, the murmur of voices, the occasional gust of wind sweeping in dust, and the scent of fresh bread, livestock manure, and burning wood. The air is thick with the aroma of herbs, sage, chamomile, and rosemary, burned or carried in small pouches, believed to keep away the pestilence and evil spirits that lurk unseen. Your fingers brush against the rough surfaces of your tools, wooden spatulas, glass vials, or small leather pouches, and you feel the weight of your responsibilities pressing down with each step. Today, your work might involve visiting a cluster of homes where the sick lie curled by the fire, their faces pale and sweat-drenched, their coughs rattling like distant thunder. You approach cautiously, your heartbeat echoing in your ears as you listen to the faint, wheezing, smell the sickly sweetness of feverish bodies, and notice the pallor of skin that's more translucent than healthy. You examine a patient's pulse, feeling the rapid beat beneath your fingertips, the warmth of their skin contrasting sharply with the cold sweat that beads across their brow. You carry your herbs, dried roots, crushed leaves, and fragrant resins in a small pouch ready to be brewed into teas or applied as poultices. The herbs crackle softly as you crush them, releasing a scent that's both earthy and medicinal, a natural aroma that somehow feels reassuring in this grim setting. You might burn a sprig of dried lavender or sage near the bed, hoping that the smoke will purify the air or chase away the evil spirits believed to cause illness. Sometimes you burn the clothing of the infected, cloth soaked with the sweat and dirt of the sick, to prevent the spread of disease, a practice that seems almost medieval in its simplicity. Your tasks are many. You diagnose, you advise, you prepare remedies, and occasionally you burn the contaminated clothing or bedding as a ritual of purification. The smell of burnt herbs and charred fabric lingers in the air, a reminder of the ongoing battle between health and contagion. As you work, you're watched by villagers, some with gratitude, others with suspicion. You exchange quick words with the local priest who nods solemnly, perhaps reciting a prayer or blessing before you leave. Soldiers pass by, their armor clinking and their faces grim, wary of the sickness that spreads like wildfire through the town. You observe children playing, their laughter breaking through the somber surroundings, oblivious to the dangers that lurk unseen. You notice the noblemen and women dressed in fine velvets and silks, giving you a glance tinged with condescension or curiosity, rich enough to afford the finest remedies, yet powerless before the invisible enemies of disease. You might hear snippets of conversation, rumors of a new plague, warnings about the superstitions that still hold sway, or tales of healers who were cursed for their hubris. Some believe that carrying a cane wasn't just for support, but was used to poke at the patients from a safe distance, or that smoking herbs in the beak of the mask was a form of medieval aromatherapy designed to keep the air around you clear of evil spirits. Others swear that wearing a particular amulet or reciting a prayer before every visit will ward off the worst of the pestilence. Behind the busy market stalls and the wary glances, a deeper fear lingers, an understanding that despite all your efforts, the disease is a force beyond human control. The community's rhythm revolves around these rituals, feasts, processions, and prayers designed to appease the divine and keep the pestilence at bay. Every village, every town has its own customs, some more superstitious than others, yet all share the same underlying anxiety that death could come knocking at any moment in the form of invisible, unstoppable sickness. As you go about your work, you're just one piece in this vast, uncertain puzzle, doing your part, whether through herbs, prayers, or simple compassion. And behind every cautious glance and every whispered prayer, there's a collective hope that the next patient you see might be the last infected, that the pestilence will pass, and that life, however fragile, will continue. But to understand why this world functions the way it does, with its rituals, its fears, and its unyielding faith, we need to step into the beliefs and superstitions that shape every choice, every gesture, every breath. Because behind every busy market stall and every wary glance, there's a deeper fear that shapes this world, a fear that no matter how much you try to cure or protect, some forces remain beyond mortal reach. And in that fragile balance between life and death, your role, however humble, becomes a testament to the resilience of a community that fights, hopes, and prays in the face of the unknown. You step into the shadowed streets of the medieval village, and almost immediately you feel it. This heavy, almost tangible presence of fear that clings to everything like a thick fog. It's not just in the whispered prayers you hear from behind shuttered windows or the distant tolling of church bells marking another funeral procession. No, it's woven into the very air you breathe, seeping into the stones beneath your feet and filling the silence that settles between the hurried footsteps of villagers. Fear here is like the smoke from 100 chimneys. You breathe it in, whether you want to or not, its tendrils curling around your senses, whispering of unseen dangers lurking in every shadow. It's a constant companion, shaping every moment of daily life, coloring even the brightest days with a subtle dread that refuses to fade. You notice the way people cast nervous glances over their shoulders, clutching their rosaries as if they could ward off the invisible threats, be it the pestilence, famine, or divine punishment. The churches are packed today, as they often are, filled with the scent of burning candles and incense, the air thick with the smoke that carries prayers upward like a fragile bridge between earth and heaven. Inside, the flickering candlelight dances upon the painted saints and crucifixes, their eyes seemingly watching over the congregation, offering little comfort but plenty of reassurance that divine power is always nearby. You hear the muffled murmur of voices, the soft hum of monks singing ancient hymns, their chants rising in a hypnotic wave that seems to drown out the whispers of fear that still echo in every corner of this world. Outside, the streets are lined with signs of religiosity, tiny shrines with fresh flowers, amulets hung from doorframes, symbols carved into wood or painted on walls, each one a small act of defiance against the chaos that threatens to swallow them whole. Today, you might scroll through a digital feed for comfort, or perhaps distract yourself with a quick message or meme, but here, people clutch their rosaries as if they were life jackets in a storm, desperately hoping that divine grace will keep the sickness at bay. Superstitions are the mortar holding this fragile society together. You see villagers pressing dried herbs into little cloth bags, amulets of protection against spirits, or the miasma they believe causes disease. Some carry tiny bones or teeth, believing these charms have the power to chase away evil. Others burn herbs, mugwort, wormwood, or lavender, in small braziers or sprinkle them around their homes, convinced that fragrant smoke will purify the air and exorcise the invisible demons of illness. It's the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning. You might chuckle at the thought, but for them, these rituals are as vital as breathing. They believe that the miasma, that foul, rotten air, rises from the ground or seeps from the dead, and that only by warding it with perfumes, prayers, or even the blood of sacrificed animals can they hope to stay healthy. Some swear by pouring holy water or reciting specific prayers, while others believe that wearing a particular symbol, perhaps a painted cross or a carved talisman, will shield them from the pestilence. The line between faith and superstition is razor thin, and everyone walks it with a mixture of hope and desperation. You might find yourself chuckling quietly at the absurdity. Imagine a community convinced that whipping themselves in the streets could earn divine mercy, or that carrying a dead toad in your pocket might prevent the plague from taking hold. These beliefs are as much an act of rebellion as they are a plea for mercy, a way to feel in control amid the chaos. The collective fears are palpable. They unite and divide at the same time. The threat of the plague has everyone on edge, turning neighbors into accusers overnight, quick to point fingers at witches or heretics who might be spreading the sickness with malicious magic or cursed blood. Accusations fly faster than arrows, and lynchings or exile are often the community's answer to what they see as the source of their suffering. You see a crowd gathering around a suspected witch, her face pale but her eyes defiant, as she clutches a talisman and mutters a prayer. The fear of heresy or witchcraft fuels these outbursts, for in times of crisis, everyone becomes a potential threat to the fragile social order. And so the community remains in a constant state of alert, listening for the faintest sound, watching for the smallest sign of trouble. You, as a healer, occupy a strange space in this web of fears. Some villagers look at you with hope, whispering prayers that your herbs and charms will save them. Others eye you with suspicion. Are you a divine servant or a cursed agent of death? The whispers follow you as you pass, some calling you a savior, others muttering that you are part of the curse, a tool of the divine punishment they fear so deeply. You notice the subtle shifts in their expressions, some eyes narrowing in doubt, others pleading silently for salvation, clutching their amulets tighter as you approach. Sometimes villagers offer strange gifts, an odd feather, a shard of bone, or a handful of herbs, believing that offering these objects will garner divine favor or ward off the worst. You might chuckle inwardly at the oddity of it all. Some believed that carrying a dead toad in your pocket could ward off the plague, while others thought that whipping themselves in the streets would earn God's mercy. The community's fears are as diverse as their beliefs, yet they all hinge on one core truth. Faith is their shield, and superstition their sword. Fear here is like the smoke from 100 chimneys, unavoidable, ever-present, and often beautiful in its own way. It's a fog that envelops every market, every church, every home, whispering that the danger is near, that divine wrath is always just a prayer away. And yet amid all this anxiety, life persists. People still gather for festivals, processions, and prayers, clinging to their rituals with a determination that's almost poetic. Beyond the superstitions and fears, there are bonds, fragile, human, and surprisingly resilient, that hold this world together. People reach for one another in moments of crisis, sharing a silent hope that their faith, their charms, and their community will see them through. Because even in a world heavy with fear, people still reach out, still cling to hope, and still believe that love and faith can somehow tip the scales back in their favor. And as you move through this landscape of shadows and whispers, remember, fear here is like a storm passing overhead. It's loud and thunderous, but it's not forever. It's part of the night, but dawn will come, bringing new light, new hopes, and perhaps a glimpse of peace beyond the fears. You notice how neighbors exchange wary glances, but also small gestures of kindness, sharing a loaf of bread, helping lift a fallen cart, or whispering words of reassurance in the thick smoke of a communal fire. Life here is woven tightly with bonds that, in their own way, are both a lifeline and a prison, tethering people to routines they can't escape yet desperately need. Forget Netflix family dramas. Here, your cousin might literally sleep on the floor 2 feet away from you every single night, sharing a rough blanket and a shared silence that's more comforting than words. The family unit is the core of your world. Parents, children, grandparents, each role defined by obligation and love, but also by unspoken expectations. You see a grandmother rocking her grandchild, her face lined with worry, but softened by the innocent giggles of the little one. The children's laughter echoes through the cramped cottages, a reminder that even amid plague and peril, innocence persists. Yet, it's also a reminder that family can be a cage with its duties and rituals binding you tighter than chains, marriages arranged, debts owed, promises made under the shadow of the church's watchful eye. And then there are the friendships, small, fragile flames flickering in the darkness. You observe neighbors helping each other with chores, sharing a measly bowl of porridge, or whispering advice under the cover of night, secrets meant to keep the darkness at bay. Sometimes those bonds are all that stand between you and despair, yet in times of plague, trust is a rare commodity. A neighbor might lend you a handful of herbs or a secret cure, perhaps a strange potion of dried herbs or a talisman blessed by a wandering monk, knowing that today trust can save your life and tomorrow it can turn into suspicion. You can almost hear the silent questions. Is he truly my friend, or is he part of the curse? Love, however, remains one of the most daring acts of rebellion against the chaos. You might catch a glimpse of a young couple exchanging a furtive glance across a crowded tavern, their eyes promising clandestine meetings if the fiddles and flutes don't drown out their whispers. Or perhaps you see a promise of marriage, carved into the bark of a tree or whispered beneath the glow of a flickering candle during a secret gathering. Romantic hopes here are as fragile as a glass of wine, delicate, easily shattered, yet fiercely treasured. In the shadows, lovers steal moments together, their hands trembling as they exchange tokens or simple words of devotion, knowing all too well how quickly love can become a target for suspicion or envy. And what about the hierarchies that shape these bonds? They are the invisible threads pulling at everything. Lords and noblewomen look down from their lofty estates, their laughter echoing through the stone corridors, while peasants toil under their watch, each knowing their place and their limits. A noble's word carries weight, sometimes enough to grant a favor, other times enough to condemn a man to exile or worse. The church's figures, priests, monks, and the plague doctor, stand at a peculiar crossroads, revered by some, feared by others, never fully trusted. You see a priest blessing a sick child, his voice rising in a prayer that seems to shake the very skies, yet villagers whisper behind his back. Are his prayers enough, or just another ritual to ward off the unseen? The doctor, with his strange mask and herbal bags, is a figure of awe and suspicion, respected for his knowledge yet often misunderstood, caught between divine providence and mortal science. Every community event becomes a tapestry of sights, smells and sounds, bright banners fluttering, the scent of baked bread and roasted meats filling the air, the rhythmic pounding of drums or the lilting melodies of a fiddle that makes even the heaviest hearts momentarily lighter. You find yourself in the midst of a festival, perhaps a wedding or a Saints' Day procession, where everyone dresses in their finest, velvet cloaks, embroidered gowns, or simple linen shirts, and moves together in a dance of shared faith and tradition. The air is thick with the smell of incense and the sweat of exertion, hands clasped in greeting, kisses on cheeks, and the collective heartbeat of a community that refuses to surrender entirely to despair. But amid these moments of unity, the tensions bubble beneath the surface, rivalries flare up over land or cattle, and old grudges resurface as accusations of witchcraft or heresy. You hear whispers about a neighbor's secret meetings or the strange deaths attributed to curses, each story adding fuel to the fire of suspicion. Public punishments, whether a flogging or a shaming, are community spectacles, half justice, half twisted entertainment, medieval version of the reality TV show, where everyone watches with a mix of horror and fascination. You might see a woman accused of witchcraft, her hands trembling as villagers throw stones or chant prayers, the scene a stark reminder that social bonds can turn into battlegrounds in a heartbeat. And yet, despite it all, life finds a way to persist. Your role, whether as healer, clerk, or observer, places you at the center of this web of relationships. People look at you with a mixture of hope and suspicion, whispering prayers when you pass, offering small gifts or tokens, an odd feather, a piece of jewelry, a pinch of herbs, believing these acts of faith will protect them. They see your role as both a necessity and a threat, depending on their fears or their faith. Some see you as a guardian, a conduit of divine mercy. Others wonder whether you're just another pawn in the game of survival or a harbinger of death. You can feel their eyes on you, some full of gratitude, others tinged with distrust, each interaction a delicate dance of words and gestures. And for all the strange customs and superstitions, some of the most bizarre are downright astonishing. In certain villages, people believed that sneezing during a wedding was a good omen, unless it was the bride's aunt, in which case it was a curse. Some thought that public whipping, done in the name of penance, could keep the plague away, an idea that makes modern psychology wince, but was as real as the dirt under their nails. Others believed that carrying a tiny dried toad in your pocket might ward off evil spirits, or that whispering a prayer to a particular saint could stop the wind from spreading disease. These rituals, as strange as they seem, are woven into their very fabric, part superstition, part hope, part desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. And so you live within this intricate web of human connection, sometimes warm, often complicated, always vital. The community's fears, their joys, their conflicts, they are all part of a grand, imperfect symphony. You see how these bonds hold them together, how they fracture, and how they endure. Because deep down, in a world overshadowed by death and uncertainty, it's the ties between people, small acts of kindness, shared memories, whispered hopes, that keep the flame alive. Even in a time of relentless danger, these relationships are the true treasure, the quiet heartbeat of a society clinging to life amid the shadows. And as you walk through this landscape of fears and fervor, remember, the strongest bond of all is the hope that somehow love, trust, and community will outlast even the darkest night. You find yourself drawn toward a humble wooden table, its surface scarred and uneven, illuminated by the flickering glow of tallow candles that cast warm, dancing shadows across the rough-hewn planks. The air is thick with the aroma of a simple meal, perhaps a thin broth simmered with grains and a few stray vegetables, mingling with the scent of salt-cured fish and the faint, herbal note of sage and thyme. Beneath your nose, the faint tang of vinegar and fermented ale hints at the flavors that sustain this life, even amid scarcity. As you settle into your seat, your gaze falls on the array of vessels before you, wooden trenchers piled with coarse bread, their crusts dark and cracked, each slice offering a satisfying crunch that echoes like a small thunderclap when bitten. Flat, rugged cheese sits beside a handful of eggs, their shells dull but solid, ready to be broken and shared. Around you, the textures of the tableware tell stories. Rough clay bowls, metal cups dented from countless refills, and a battered knife, the only utensil you need. You might find yourself picking up a wooden spoon, feeling its smoothness, the slight warmth still lingering from the stew it ladled. There's no fine silverware or porcelain here, only what's necessary, and yet each piece holds its own history, its own quiet dignity. Today's menu is familiar, a reflection of the everyday. A thick pottage of barley and beans, seasoned with a pinch of salt and a sprinkle of herbs, nourishing yet humble. On special days, perhaps a small piece of salted pork or a bit of smoked sausage makes its appearance, adding a savory richness to the meal. Fruits are scarce, often dried or preserved. Dried figs, a few apples, or maybe a handful of dried cherries, tiny bursts of sweetness that make the mundane a little sweeter. The drink is humble too, water with a hint of earthiness, or a weak ale that bubbles faintly in your mug, offering a slight bitterness that cuts through the richness of the food. It's a far cry from the lavish banquets of the nobility, where tables groan under the weight of roasted meats, spiced pastries, and wines worth more than some peasants' entire week. Here the focus is on sustenance, on survival, yet even in its austerity, the act of eating is a ritual, a moment of pause amid the chaos. Before you dig in, a quick prayer might pass your lips, a gesture of humility and gratitude, an acknowledgement that this simple share is a gift. Washing your hands in a basin of cold water, you feel the roughness of the cloth, the dirt that stubbornly clings despite the effort. The etiquette here is straightforward. No silver spoon, no silver fork, only the order of respect for the meal and each other. Sometimes a family or a Small gathering will eat together, each person passing a piece of bread or a handful of herbs, the shared warmth of companionship making even the plainest fare feel like a feast. The table is a stage where social hierarchies are subtly enacted. Lords and noblemen sit apart, their plates laden with exotic spices, their cups filled with the finest wine, red and fragrant, imbued with cinnamon or saffron if they are lucky. Their servants wait discreetly, ready to refill a goblet or fetch more bread. Meanwhile, the peasants gather in simpler groups, their food basic but plentiful enough to keep hunger at bay, sharing stories or quiet glances filled with unspoken hopes. As you look around, you notice the contrast, one table piled high with roasted game, the other with a humble stew, yet both are places of gathering, of connection. The marketplace outside hums with life, vendors shouting their prices, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air, barrels of ale being tapped, and the clang of blacksmiths forging new tools. You see the baker, kneading dough with hands covered in flour, shouting out the price of bread, while the cook in the tavern scrapes the last bits of meat from a spit, the smell of roasting meat promising comfort after a long day. The kitchen of a noble estate is a different world altogether. Aromas of saffron and honey, the clatter of silverware, and the careful presentation of dishes that are as much art as sustenance. Yet even here, the core remains the same. Food is a language, a way to mark status, to celebrate, or simply to survive. You notice how leftovers are carefully saved, repurposed into new dishes, bones boiled for broth, bread turned into croutons, or scraps fed to the dogs or the poor. Waste is rare, as every morsel is precious, a reminder that scarcity sharpens the senses and makes each taste a small victory. As you finish your humble meal, the hunger eased but not fully gone, your thoughts drift to what comes next. Perhaps a walk through the busy streets where the sounds of laughter, fiddles, and the clatter of tavern tables fill the night air. Or maybe a quiet moment by the fire, contemplating how, even in times of hardship, the simple act of breaking bread keeps hope alive, because after all, nothing unites people quite like sitting together around a shared table where stories are told, bonds are forged, and the night's small pleasures momentarily drown out the shadows. And as the last crumbs are cleared away, the city begins to breathe again, its heartbeat echoing in the music, the laughter, and the promise that tomorrow's meal, however modest, will carry with it the same warmth of shared life. Soon, the streets will fill with the lively sounds of dance and song, merriment that turns the night into a celebration, a reminder that even in the darkest times, the table remains a place of refuge, connection, and quiet joy. You step out from the shadowed threshold of the tavern, the air embracing you with a mixture of warmth and dampness, as if the night itself had turned to a thick, waiting blanket. Lanterns sway gently in the breeze, casting soft circles of amber light that dance on the cobblestones, while the distant murmur of laughter and song drifts through the streets like a gentle tide. Shadows stretch long and lazy, mingling with the faint aroma of warm beer, malted and sour, and the faint scent of damp wood and crushed herbs from the nearby market stalls. Somewhere, a dog buffs its tail against the dampness, and a child's giggle echoes, muffled yet persistent, amid the hush of the evening. You walk along the narrow alleyways that lead to the village square, where a small crowd has gathered, their voices rising and falling in a quiet chorus. The glow of a few flickering candles on the tables outside the tavern flickers like a heartbeat, and the smell of fermented ale mingles with the sweet, smoky scent of burning wood. The cobblestones beneath your feet feel uneven but familiar, worn smooth by generations of footsteps, each one a silent witness to the community's rhythm, its quiet pulse of daily life. In the tavern, the scene is alive with motion and sound. The worn benches creak softly as bodies settle into their places, the rough-hewn tables cluttered with empty cups and scattered dice. You notice a group of men engrossed in a game of nine men's Morris, their fingers tapping the wood in time with the faint strumming of an old lute that drifts from a corner. The dice, small and rounded, clatter on the rough table, bouncing like promises of luck, or the cruelest of jokes, landing flat on their sides as if the gods themselves had shrugged and turned away. The sound of the dice rolling is like a soft promise, a whisper of hope that ends as abruptly as a balletto no film do mess, an expectation dashed against the weight of reality. A musician, perhaps a village youth, plucks at a lute and a Rebecca, their strings vibrating with simple melodies. Flutes and tambourines join in, weaving a tapestry of sound that makes the room sway gently, almost as if the walls breathe along with the rhythm. You find yourself tapping your foot, your hands resting on your knees, feeling the warm, sticky sweat that clings to your skin, sweat that tastes of effort and shared joy. The dance begins, slow and unpretentious, around a circle of villagers, their boots scraping the dirt floor, marking the beat in a pattern as ancient as the stars. Their steps are straightforward, no grand choreographies here, just the simple pleasure of moving together, of feeling the pulse of life that refuses to pause, even in darkness. Across the street, a small wooden stage hosts a puppet show, its crude figures jerking and bouncing in a moral tale that makes some chuckle, and others fall silent with reverence. The characters, clad in painted scraps of fabric, reenact a moral lesson about virtue and vice, about humility and pride. The villagers watch, some with smiles, others with quiet contemplation, as the story unfolds under the watchful eye of a simple wooden crossbeam. Nearby, a procession of villagers carrying candles winds slowly past, their flickering flames casting a golden glow that mingles with the earthy scent of Serra e Ervas, wax and herbs, filling the air with a faint, sacred aroma. The smell of candelabra wax melting, mixed with the faint incense of burnt herbs, echoes a ritual of devotion, a spiritual dance that extends beyond mere entertainment. And yet, amidst all this warmth and communal joy, the shadows of the night are never far. You catch glimpses of the flagellants, a stark contrast to the merriment, marching solemnly through the streets, their robes billowing, their faces set in grim determination. Their rhythmic strikes against their backs echo through the square, silencing the laughter, turning it into a hushed respect or a cautious curiosity. Here, superstition still whispers loudly, when to dance, when to silence, when to speak, rules etched into the fabric of life by fear and faith. Observers gather at a distance, some awestruck, others wary, watching as a small crowd of flagellants performs their acts of penance, a display that blends pain with piety, reminding everyone that life's fragility is never far from the surface. As you stand among them, a figure in a simple cloak, your eyes catch the glint of respect and trepidation. Perhaps someone nudges you for a quick word, a question about a strange omen seen earlier, or a gentle touch on your arm as a reminder of the fragile balance between health and sickness. You touch the edge of the building, feeling the rough plaster under your fingertips, and offer a quiet gesture, perhaps a small blessing or just a reassuring hand, knowing that your role as a healer, even in these moments of fleeting respite, is woven into this tapestry of life. The community's heartbeat is a rhythm of laughter, fear, hope, and quiet resilience. Between the music and the shadows, the night whispers its secrets. The distant toll of a bell signals the hour, a reminder that time flows relentlessly, an unspoken truth that everything begins and ends in this cycle. The dance of life continues as the village remembers that even amid the darkness, there is light in shared moments, in hopes that shimmer like candles in the night. When the last note fades and the last torch flickers low, the bell responds, a gentle chime that reminds you all of this, the laughter, the fears, the fleeting joys, are part of the same long, winding road of existence. Every celebration whispers the silent truth. Everything begins, everything transforms, and everything ultimately returns to dust. And yet, for now, you breathe in the night, its scent of herbs and smoke, its laughter and silence, and let yourself be carried by this gentle rhythm of life, knowing that even in the shadows, the community's spirit remains fiercely alive. Outside, the sounds of the village drift softly, cloaked in the hush of dusk, where the distant chime of the church bell echoes like a slow heartbeat, reminding you of the endless cycle that shapes all life. In these moments, you reflect on the delicate miracle that is birth. How a midwife, with steady hands and whispered prayers, welcomes new life into a world shaped by faith and hope. The baby's first cry is small but profound, a tiny bell announcing a promise, fragile and fleeting, yet fiercely alive amid the shadows of mortality. The air is tinged with the scent of rough linen, a hint of warm milk and dried herbs carried in by the breeze, simple aromas that cradle the newborn in a comforting embrace. You imagine the hurried baptism, the water poured with reverence, sealing the tiny being's place in this fragile fabric of existence, a moment both urgent and sacred, as if whispering, "Remember, mortal life is a delicate thread." As the child grows, alliances are forged, perhaps a simple ring of metal and cloth exchanged at the church door, a promise of union, of shared futures. The community gathers, mothers with embroidered veils, fathers with steady hands, blessing the couple with words that echo softly in the crisp air. A loaf of bread, a pinch of salt, a few bright ribbons, small tokens of a union that binds lives and hopes. Outside, a brief tune hums from a wandering musician, the notes woven into the fabric of the day, a lullaby for the passing seasons. In time, the craft of life is handed down, an old carpenter's hands shaping wood, a grandmother's voice recounting stories of harvests and harvesters, her fingers tracing the carved initials on a worn bench that has borne countless burdens and blessings. That bench, marked by years of laughter and tears, becomes a silent witness to generations, each groove a memory, each scar an echo of a life lived with purpose. But life is also fleeting. When illness comes, be it the pestilence or other shadows, your role, if you are a healer, is to serve with dignity. The simple act of unction, the murmur of prayers, sometimes hurried, sometimes reverent, attempts to ease suffering. The sick lie quiet, their breaths shallow, the weight of fear pressing down like a heavy curtain. No elaborate rites are possible in these moments, only the gentle touch of oil, the soft words of comfort, and the silent hope that the soul finds peace. The whispers of prayers blend with the quiet sobs as death, inevitable and silent, quietly claims its toll. The village, in its humble way, responds, bells toll slowly, a somber melody marking the departure of one life. The funeral procession moves swiftly, shadows stretching long, carrying the departed in a simple wooden coffin, the scent of serre terra, wax and earth, filling the air. The grave is shallow, perhaps shared with others, fallen to the same unseen enemy, the soil pressed softly over the resting body, a final act of humility. In memory, names are spoken softly at family tables, prayers whispered in the dark, and the image of the departed remains, an echo in the flickering candlelight, a prayer on trembling lips. Throughout this cycle, birth, union, death, there is a quiet comfort woven into the very fabric of daily life. The stained glass windows of the church reflect scenes of danza macabre, reminding all that mortality is woven into the tapestry of existence, an ever-present truth wrapped in beauty and humility. The simple verses of Ecclesiastes echo softly in your mind. There is a time to be born and a time to die, a gentle reminder that life's fleeting nature is what makes each moment precious. As you prepare to rest, you think of the countless small miracles, the shared bread at the table, the warm clasp of a hand, the laughter in a crowded street. Every breath, every heartbeat is part of this divine rhythm, an endless dance of beginnings and endings, woven into the very marrow of the world. The candle's flame flickers lower, the glow waning, yet the warmth remains, an ember of life that lingers quietly in the darkness. Close your eyes now and listen to the steady, gentle breathing of the night. The city continues its breath as you drift into sleep, carried by memories of life's gentle passage, and comforted by the knowledge that every dawn is a promise, every dusk a gentle farewell. When the last light finally fades and silence settles softly around you, remember, in this endless cycle there is a sacred beauty, an invitation to rest, to trust, and to embrace the quiet peace of the night